Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the functional diagnostic nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 380 of the Health Detective Podcast. I can see a few of you on already, so thank you for bearing with us. I would like to always take responsibility for stuff. If you can't tell by my background and the fact that the microphone's in front of me and I'm kind of holding it, believe it or not, our slight delay here was due to me and not our guest today. We are traveling currently for the holidays, and I got this new laptop, which is awesome because we need a little bit of a write-off for the end of the year. Now, the downside of the new laptop is setting up all your tech and getting all that stuff good to go. So we have a little bit of a makeshift background. If it's your first time tuning in, you might not be wildly impressed with the host. I promised our guests are at least good, so that's all that matters. And I'm super excited to have her today. I've seen your name many times throughout our FDN journeys together, but we never really got to get fully connected, so I am excited about it. One thing I will share with you guys before we get started is we had Dr. Lori Rose on the other day talking about her free, there's no cost to it, free weight loss webinar that will be coming up in, I think it's in December or sometime later this week. Either way, make sure you get registered for that. So that's fdntraining.com/weight loss webinar. It's fdntraining.com/weight loss webinar. We were super grateful because already 17 people or something from the podcast alone signed up for it. So we are excited to have you guys there. And Dr. Lori is just someone, she over-delivers on everything that she does. Even just the podcast the other day, more or less that was supposed to be an advertisement for the webinar, and she still did a great job with so much information. So the webinar itself is a formal presentation, and she's brilliant. She's a PhD. She's a professor at a college down in Texas. So you definitely want to get there and learn some stuff from her. For our guest today, let me pull this up. Kimberly Rose is a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and the founder of Kimberly Rose Wellness. After going through her own health issues, she became passionate about helping other people through their own health journey. She specializes now in helping busy, driven health seekers find clear answers to their mysterious symptoms so they can trust food and live confidently again. I love the trust food part. We'll get to that because that's very important. Her approach focuses on identifying the right foods for each individual and uncovering hidden healing opportunities through functional lab testing. My friend, thank you for dealing with my technical stuff, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Evan. I appreciate you having me today.
All right, so we will get started just like we always do on this show. No one really gets into this space by accident. Either someone very close to them dealt with something, or we personally dealt with stuff. So my question for you to get us rolling here is, what did your health symptoms look like, and when did they begin?
So my health symptoms that got me to this space started well over 10 years ago. So maybe 11, 12 years ago. And the very first time it happened was very vivid in my mind because my husband and I were traveling to visit family, and I had eaten something before we left, and it was a 30-minute drive to get to our family's house. And within 15 minutes into our drive, I realized I wasn't going to make it to our family's house. There was just this overwhelming feeling of cramping, pain, nausea, and I knew I was going to have to find something. But we're in rural Texas, and so we found a pasture somewhere, and luckily there was a porta potty that appeared from the heavens. I don't know what it was doing there, but at the moment I didn't care, and that was the first time I had what I call episodes. And so it was just basically severe cramping, diarrhea, vomiting, where everything had to come out of my body. And then I broke out into hives after that. And I was just so dumbfounded. I had no idea where that came from. And so, I just kind of thought, well, that was weird. And then it started happening, once or twice a year, then 3 times a year. And so eventually I did go see a gastrologist, had a colonoscopy, nothing was found. And, I just thought this is just something I'm going to have to deal with because it wasn't interrupting my life enough at the time to really do much more. I would ask doctors about these symptoms, but they would all shrug their shoulders. My blood work looked fine. Everything was normal, right? And so fast forward to 2020, when we were all at home and I started working out again and doing weights. And I noticed that, I was having pain in my joints and couldn't really do the things that I used to do or enjoyed doing because I hadn't weight trained in a while. So things just felt like they had broken down in my body. And at this point in time, I was having episodes every 3 to 6 weeks. And so I knew I had to do something. And I went back to the same gastrologist that I saw before, who did the colonoscopy. And he basically just told me, keep eating whatever you're eating. And one of the biggest issues that I had with having these episodes is that I couldn't go to the bathroom for 7 to 10 days after that.
Wow.
And so I asked him, is that normal? And his answer was, well, sometimes when you empty the tank, you have to fill it up again. And he said it's different for everybody. So he wasn't one of those believers that you have to go to the bathroom every day, or you should be going to the bathroom every day. And so I just feel like that buildup of toxins over years and years was a big issue for me. And so I found functional health after that and decided to find my own answers and started digging. And my functional doctors that I found started working on like liver, gallbladder stuff. They changed my whole diet. And all of that was great. And I was going 3 months and 4 months without episodes. And and then I was taking supplements because I was very nutrient depleted. And so really, once I found functional lab testing and started getting more answers there, that is where the dots started connecting. And I became very passionate about this kind of medicine, became very passionate about helping people find answers to the mysterious symptoms that I had. Because it took me years to figure it out. And I felt like if I was going through this, somebody else had to be. And so I found FDN and decided to go all in. And through FDN is where I found even more answers as well through those functional labs. And that's how I wound up in this space today.
All right, plenty to unpack for sure. You
Yeah.
used the word dumbfounded when you were experiencing this stuff. Maybe the answer is yes to this. Maybe it's no. No worries either way. I'm just curious. Were you scared when this was happening? Because I mean, people think of bathroom issues as more embarrassing or annoying, but I'm thinking about the hives and the other things that were happening. It's a pretty serious thing. So was there fear around this?
Definitely. It is embarrassing to talk about because nobody wants to talk about diarrhea and vomiting, but very much so when I was in those moments, every single time it happened, it was always a moment that was like, please, dear God, let this pass because it hurt so bad. It was always a prayer to not pass out, or it was a prayer to, or swearing that you'll never eat that ever again. But the weird thing is that it was food that I'd eaten 100 times. And even if I had eaten that same exact thing that caused the problem the very next day, it wouldn't cause it at that point. So then, what was it? And so eventually I found out, it was histamine type issues, mast cell activation type issues. But it wasn't just one thing. And when I first went to my functional doctor, I went with the impression of I need to figure out that one thing that I need to quit eating or that one thing I need to quit drinking to live a normal life again, because this was causing issues even with our family, like on vacations. My kids were scared. I was scared. My kids were scared. Anytime this would happen, nobody wanted to be around that, and they would always, ask my husband, like, what's wrong with mommy? I mean, it was scary for everybody because when you don't know what's going on, you don't really know how serious it is.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's something that is a fairly common theme on this show. I like to go back to some of the emotions that people were experiencing, not because I want you to relive it necessarily, but because I think, one, we kind of forget sometimes how bad these things were when they were happening. And two, the people that would choose to click on something like this or that are listening, I see quite a few of you on, so thank you for, again, being here with us, and I apologize for, on my end, with the technical stuff. The people that are actively dealing with these things, they're still very much experiencing those emotions. And so when we share that with them and when we have the courage to be vulnerable in this way, it's validating to them to let them know, yeah, no, this is what was going on at the time. And I was freaking out. I was scared of this stuff. It affected my life. I didn't know why it was happening, because now we come at this thankfully in a very empowered place. And we can say it almost as matter of fact, like, look, this happened here, and I was able to figure this out. But many individuals that choose to listen to these shows, they have no idea what figuring it out means. They're still in that phase of either a cycle of trial and error, as we always say at FDN, or whatever it might be. This next question might be a little premature, but I was very tempted with this because I thought it was a very interesting way to word it. I've never, of all the bios I've read, I've never heard someone word it this way. You talked about trusting food again. Now, I can already use common sense as an interviewer, but also a listener, too. I'm listening to you, right? When you brought up this idea that one day you could eat a food and it seems to be problematic, and the next day it doesn't seem to be problematic, I'd imagine trust has to do something with that. But I'd like to dive deeper into that. What does it mean to not trust food? What does that mean?
Well, it's the fear of food. It's the fear that the next thing you eat could give you another problem, that could wind up in an episode where you're in the bathroom for an hour and a half. And you don't want to experience that pain. And whenever I first started down the functional medicine path and started changing my diet, they put me on an elimination diet at first. No corn, no soy, no peanuts, no dairy, no gluten. And that was hard. But then also I had a food sensitivities test, where they did all the skin pricks and everything. And so that narrowed it down even more. And so it was like, what do I eat? How do I even, I was just afraid to try anything. So everything was very limited at the very beginning. I remember eating a lot of gluten-free bread, avocado toast, and scrambled eggs. All of that felt good and on my stomach. But that really was the start. And then starting to eat more vegetables, that really was the start of reducing the inflammation that I had going on in my body at the time. Because really, I was just a mess. My blood work showed that I was just very inflamed, and we needed to calm everything down, is basically what my doctor said.
By the way, for anyone that's on, I usually wait for another 15, 20 minutes into the show, but if you guys do have questions about anything that we're talking about or anything that Kimberly's sharing, feel free to throw them in the chat and I'll let her know and we can get her answer. But the reason the trusting the food thing, I think, hit home for me, and I know this is true for a lot of other people, people misuse the word orthorexic in our space. And orthorexic, for those that don't know, is an actual condition, and it's not the same thing, but it would typically be seen, sometimes people with anorexia will exhibit these symptoms. It's in that similar category. So orthorexia is defined as a preoccupation with the quality of one's food, right? You become very obsessed with how it was grown and what the ingredients are and all that kind of stuff. Whether or not it's based on science is a different point. It's you become focused on this quality of it. And I think a lot of us almost exhibit those symptoms, but for reasons that are grounded, because we've actually experienced, negative effects from the food. And I think what becomes so tough is, for myself, I didn't realize that I was breaking out. Yes, because of certain foods, sure, but mostly because I was sick overall, right? Just like some of the stuff that you were dealing with was mostly because you're sick overall. And you start to attribute the symptoms, which for me, again, being a skin breakout, to these certain things. Now, I know at one point you were dealing with these episodes maybe once every 3 to 6 weeks. I believe, is that correct? That's what you said?
Yeah, 3 to 6
okay.
weeks.
So skin issues for me, and I think a lot of symptoms for various people, are a daily issue. And so think about that. I'm breaking out daily anyway, but I would start to convince myself that it was certain foods that were doing that. And it got to a point where I look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, there was a time where I was really down to, 7 or 8 foods. And some people with mast cell activation syndrome actually do that on purpose because they almost feel like, well, not even feel, they kind of have to for a certain time while they're healing, if they don't want to be aggravated. I don't know that I had to do that. I don't know that there was any evidence I had to do that, but I convinced myself that was the case. And it took me many years to incorporate certain things into my diet again, because I kept thinking that this was going to be the final straw that would, the straw that would break the camel's back, but it didn't happen because I actually had achieved true health. I'm not even advocating for this for everyone. I know it isn't for everyone, but I didn't eat dairy for 6 years. I started eating dairy again. For me, high quality dairy is now a daily part of my diet, and it works extremely well. It helps me maintain calories. I was someone that was so restricted with my foods, my calories were too low. So dairy is very helpful for that. But it's very tough psychologically even reincorporating these things, and again, trusting that you can eat this stuff. And I almost think, I'm speaking for myself, not for everyone. I'd love to know what you think about this, either with yourself or with clients. I almost think that there was a certain period of time, which I cannot accurately identify. I don't know when it began. I know when it ends, but I don't know when it began. But I think there was a certain period of time where it was the psychological beliefs around the food that were affecting my health worse than the actual food at that point. Does that resonate with you at all? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my issue was like yours, just being so limited, and then you just feel, and a lot of this was happening around the holidays too when I first started this journey. So we're talking the fall, October, November, December, and so I found a lot of joy kind of being taken out of because food is enjoyment to most people, right? That's how most people view food. We go out to eat with friends or family to sit and enjoy a meal. And when you have to be restrictive or when you have to be specific about what you're eating, it takes kind of that fun out of it. So I had to experience that, and it's a mindset shift that happens along the way. But at that time, it was very hard.
I love that you brought that up because you know my story. I think at least somewhat.
Mhm.
You know the surface level for sure. Being sick in my early teens, I never really experienced like going out with friends because I became so restrictive that there was just no going out. I didn't do that, and to be able to re-enjoy that in my adult years, it sounds so silly, but because it's just so natural and human. It's like we're eating food. What's the big deal? It's like no man, that's like a part of our health. I think that's why the Italians and a lot of those places in Europe can do things that we actually consider not great with food, right? We wouldn't be eating dinner at 9 p.m. normally, especially not a heavy carb-rich dinner. We would tell everyone, oh, that's not a good thing to do. And yet their life expectancies are great. They got 25% of people still smoking over there. And of course, some of that's because of the lack of chemicals that they put in the foods. And I get all that. I'm not discrediting that whatsoever. But it is funny when you get around the right people and you're actually connected to other human beings, how good that is for your health. It's actually one of the biggest predictors of longevity. I researched. So that's kind of cool. Let's go back a bit and rather keep the story going. So with the lab tests, we almost listed off as like matter of fact. Now you said that you got into some lab testing. You mentioned some histamine issues. When you first got into, let's call it functional testing or natural testing, if you could call any test natural. What were some of the specific big finders that you identified that you were like, wow, no doctor has ever been able to help me with this? And if it's your first time tuning in, this is not to condemn Western medicine. It's just to show you that there's other stuff out there. So what were some of those things you found?
So one of the most important findings had to do with the hormones. I have had low thyroid issues ever since 2002, after my second child was born. I actually fell asleep at my desk during my conference period, and I woke up luckily before students walked in, and I couldn't believe that I'd never done that before in my life, and so I knew something was wrong, and so I didn't ever think that thyroid issue would come up later on as being a big part of what was happening with me with these episodes. And so whenever I had my R&R session with a mentor over my functional labs, which is a great thing that we get to do in FDN, being our own first client, she went over my hormone lab and then my GI map, and there were a lot of things to her that were signaling thyroid issues. And so we started talking about that and digging deeper. And the fact that I didn't understand that thyroid really had such an effect on your other hormones, your sex hormones, your digestion, and all of that. And so the fact that, thyroid slows down your digestive tract, and I think the reason why, I wasn't going to the bathroom every day had a lot to do with that too. And so years and years and years of that, of slowing everything down and then keeping everything where it's not supposed to be, and then toxins build up. I can see the picture now, and this was all made clear to me in my R&R, that, this is how liver toxicity happened. This is how gallbladder sludge started to come into play. And all of this, really, it wasn't just one thing. There was never just one thing I could do to really help myself. Uncovering all these layers through the functional labs. And it all kind of went back to thyroid, which I was amazed at, that I'd been treating all this time and never thought that it was going to be a factor in anything else, because I was, taking medicine for it. I'd been on thyroid medication since 2002. And so that was a big aha moment for me, was that something that I didn't know to look out for. No doctor had ever pointed out to me, these are the things that low thyroid is going to do to your body, and these are the things that you need to look out for and be careful with. That was never pointed out to me. And I loved all my doctors, like, I just feel like those are just things that they were taught to tell us, and it wasn't preventative. There wasn't any prevention stuff taught to them to teach to us. That's just kind of how I look at it. But
We need so much more of those types of comments, even on this show. And I try to do my best, but I don't want anyone to hide their opinions, and I let them share it. Obviously, that's what a decent host does, I think. But I like that you mentioned that, no, these doctors were good, and I did like them. I know some people have experienced legitimate medical gaslighting, too. I saw that in my mom. I did not really experience that. I didn't have anyone that was telling me they didn't believe what I was saying or that they didn't think that I was unwell. They weren't given the right tools for the answer. They weren't even taught to think holistically. Like, you go to endocrinologists for these very specific things. You go to a gastroenterologist for these specific things. They're not taught to think about the body necessarily as one giant interconnected unit that, yes, when you have thyroid issues, it could eventually lead to all of this stuff. So it's genuine ignorance, and that doesn't make someone a bad person for having that genuine ignorance. So I just appreciate you highlighting that. Ashley had something here, looks like more of a comment, but still appreciate it, Ashley. Thank you. She said, that's what I'm dealing with now. I'm in my elimination phase, and now I don't know how to reincorporate foods. I never knew what issues any of them caused other than what the lab work showed. So I definitely will continue to dive into that, Ashley, and hopefully provide some insight for you here. So, Kimberly, when you decided that, hey, yeah, you want to be an FDN when you grow up, this is something that you actually want to go do. Now you've been able to work with people and help them with these types of issues. So what is your advice for someone who is trying to reincorporate foods, or how do you do that in your practice? Is there a certain place where you believe that they're ready to start reincorporating things? I guess I'm looking for something objective maybe for Ashley so that she could realize either she's there or not there yet.
Yeah, so I really like to look at food sensitivities first so we know what to get rid of and what's making the immune system react. For me personally, those food sensitivities were kind of the end of the road that really, everything else that I just mentioned was everything that was leading up to that. And then all of a sudden I was sensitive to these foods, right? And so learning what you're sensitive to, what's causing your immune system to react is so helpful so that you can calm everything down. And then after, let's say 60 to 90 days, depending on the severity of the symptoms, we start with one food at a time, and we take 2 to 3 days to see how that food reacts with you. And then we introduce another food. And if there's no reactions, then we just continue that cycle until we feel like we've pinpointed these specific ones that you just, don't react well to, or, maybe you just needed that time of healing and now you're better. Because for those of you that are in this stage where I was, I do want to give you hope that you can eat food again. You can trust food again, because it's now been March 8th of 2023, I think was my last episode. So it's been it'll be 2 years this next March. And so we're over a year and a half. And so, it's still a work in progress, right? But it's wonderful to feel like, if you do want to indulge, you're not going to pay for it later. But it took, a good year and a half, and I want to say even 2 years to really get to that healing place.
I was going to ask later, so I appreciate you being transparent and sharing that with us, because we never, if anyone's listened regularly here, I never expect someone to get on the show and have everything put together. I did this show for a dang year being exposed to mold and not knowing it, right? So no, we're not looking for perfection, we're looking for progress. But the fact that you've been able to do this for almost 2 years now, that's kind of amazing, because for those that are dealing with those exact symptoms, that's quite disruptive to one's life, especially I'm not even sure what's worse. Is it worse to have it seemingly randomly every 3 to 6 weeks, or is it, worse to have it consistently every day, but at least you know what triggers it? Both have their pros and cons, right? I think the randomness of something that's very serious is particularly troubling to someone if they're dealing with it. So the fact that they could be out there listening and knowing that, hey, this is going to get better and better, that's cool. I don't know if you would remember this, and that's okay if you don't, but you clearly have the date down for the last episode, as you call it. Do you know how much time was there between that last episode and the second to last episode? Because I just want to show people what healing looks like. Was it a week before, or was it months before?
It was almost a year before. So I had
Wow.
almost gone a year, and then I had the episode, and I was like, oh, it was so close, and then it felt like I was starting all over again. But I mean, I was even happy with that. So when I started the elimination diet and, taking out the foods that I was sensitive to according to the test, I think I went 3 months because, I was at 3 to 6 weeks, right? And so I think I finally went 3 months, and then I probably went, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, and then it went almost a year. So,
It's amazing.
it definitely, yeah, the healing was taking place just with food and supplementation. Because, when you have a leaky gut because of these issues that you're having with your gastro tract, you're going to have some insufficiencies. And, I wasn't digesting my food well, so I needed digestive enzymes and just other things to really help get the nutrients back, because that's why I feel like I wasn't able to work out, and why I felt like my body was breaking down, because those nutrients weren't getting to where they needed to be in my body. So it's the body is so amazing and so complicated. And when people do come to me and ask me questions, because they are just like I was, looking for that one answer, looking for that one thing to help them, feel normal again. It's just not that easy, and we just have to peel back the layers.
Well, I feel very fortunate to have someone on today that documented this so clearly, because healing to me is very much an example of like the whole 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is when we're in the beginning of a journey, if you've, really gotten beat up and you're pretty far back, 2 steps forward, or sorry, once you take the 2 steps forward, if you go 1 step back, it still feels like, oh my gosh, I'm in this same awful place. The reality is though, if you think 2, 3, 4 years ahead, even if and when you take that 1 step back, that 1 step back is only taking you to a place that you could have only dreamed of at one point. So it is powerful, and I think sets very realistic expectations for people, not just with the conditions that you were dealing with, but like almost with any chronic health condition, that yes, you're going to just start having less and less. And similarly, it like it started a little more abruptly for you, but most of us kind of had, when these symptoms manifested to begin with, we kind of had the opposite experience where it only happened, I only got breakouts here and there at 9 years old. I started very early, 9, 10 years old. Once I was 15, then it was all day, every day, and it's a constant problem. But it was years for me before that got better. And so similarly, I need to remember in my head, if I'm on a healing journey, it is perfectly okay, if not appropriate and expected, for it to have to kind of trickle away as well. It's not just going to be you wake up one day and everything just turns off. It usually is that kind of case. So let's also say this, although I wouldn't wish this, obviously, even if you were to have an episode today, you objectively have still made progress once again, right? Because now it's been a year and change, almost 2 years. So you're still doing better. And that's really what we're looking for.
Right, for sure. And if I did have an episode, I would know, okay, I need to go back to the liver gallbladder stuff and really love my liver and do all the things, to help my liver and gallbladder to, to not be sluggish, or because it's probably what I'm eating, or to eating too much of, or not enough of, like fruits and vegetables. So I know all the things now, and that's one thing through the journey, is becoming more aware of yourself and becoming more aware of your body. Because even though I remember very vividly that very first episode that came on abruptly, I can't remember anything leading up to it other than constipation, thinking that going to the bathroom every 3 days was normal for me, because I wasn't paying attention to myself. I didn't know what to pay attention to. And now I know all those things. And those are the things that I help my family with and my clients with, to become more aware and listening to your body a little bit more.
It's such a, well, it's not basic. It seems like a basic example, but again, most people aren't able to figure out why they feel the way that they feel at all. But I think that's some of the benefits that you get as you get farther along with this, because it's not necessarily a problem per se to have periodic episodes of something or even periodic symptoms. What is a problem is to have those things and have no idea why it's happening, because that means you can't solve it. Today, this, just so you guys know, this still happens, yes, even to health podcast host guy. I woke up today, I had a pretty decent headache. Not the worst in the world, but it was something. But I'm able to reflect in a way that the average American, unfortunately, just does not reflect on at all. And we do have international listeners. I think us Americans are even worse. But, any modern country, or first world, as they say, ironically, we're sometimes the ones doing the worst with these chronic health issues. But anyway, I wake up with this headache. And as a health practitioner, what's the first thing that we think? I'm like, okay, am I hydrated properly? And not to be graphic, but again, we get into plenty of stuff on this show. So I used the restroom and I noticed, it's dark yellow. Oh, why would it have been that way? Oh, because I was traveling yesterday from North Carolina to Pennsylvania. I neglected my body. The travel itself was stressful. It was an abnormal day. So as opposed to just having my normal routine, working on the computer or doing my stuff and making sure I'm getting what I need, I didn't get anything of what I needed. I also underate, especially carbohydrates. So I'm not retaining as much water. So that's why I have the headache. Now, the point of me saying that and why that even matters, just so you guys know, is because I can solve for that in the future. What really sucks is when you're walking around with headaches and you have no idea why. And the reality is most people, if they are dealing with headaches, have no idea how to connect that prior day. And it could be even more than a prior day for some symptoms. But in my case, it was just that prior day. I'm just dehydrated. That's what happens to any human being if you're very underhydrated. So simple stuff like that. But you pick that up as you go along. And the longer you're in this space, man, the more intuitive you become with your own body, and it gives me a lot of confidence for the future that hopefully we can avoid major health crises, and we can eventually leave this earth having just died peacefully of old age. I mean, that's the goal, right? It's not to live forever. We won't do that. I think that'd get a little boring after a while anyway. It's to do it as gracefully as possible. Moving into your clients then, do you work specifically with this niche? Because I read your bio obviously out loud, and it seems like you probably go a little broader than that. So I always like to ask though, who is like your ideal type of client that you love working with? They come into your virtual office and you're like, yes, this is exactly who I was looking for.
Yeah. So my ideal client is somebody who is a health seeker and is looking for answers and is driven to really find what's going to help them feel better, because that's who I was and that's who I really connect with. And I feel like I can help someone who is in that driven pattern of really seeking answers for themselves. And so if they're committed, then we can work together. And that's not, I don't want to say easy, but it makes them easier to work with because I want to help motivated people just like I wanted to help myself at that time. I mean, I was coming home, going for walks and listening to podcasts, and then I would learn about a book, and then I would buy the book, and then I would read the book, and I would listen to more podcasts. Like I was just constantly seeking answers. So I'm looking for clients who are like that. Now, of course, I've have worked with clients who are just not really sure where to start. So they don't yet seem to be as driven, but they get to that place whenever we're working together, because I think once they have hope and they have motivation, because they do see a clear path to maybe feeling better, then that helps them in the long run too.
Awesome. Well, I know one of the things that you help your clients with, amongst many others, I kind of want to jump into this a little bit, is blood sugar. And I'd love to know how blood sugar regulation or dysregulation kind of connects to either maybe your personal story or some of the symptoms that your clients deal with. Because what I'm finding very insulting online is those of us that are using CGMs, and I actually, sorry, Boris, if you're listening somewhere, I have to re-up on my Thea Health one. But most of us that don't have diabetes and are using these CGMs, it's kind of crazy the condemnation for these things online by medical professionals. Like, oh, if you don't have diabetes, why would you ever use it? And I'm sitting thinking in my head, because I don't get into these online debates anymore, but wouldn't the most obvious one be the fact that to eventually get a diabetes diagnosis, that would imply that my blood sugar was dysregulated for some period of time beforehand? So if nothing else, as a preventative for one of the most commonly diagnosed conditions in America, type 2 diabetes, maybe that would be an argument. Let's not even talk about all the other studies showing that high blood sugar levels, even if you don't have diabetes, are correlated with worse health outcomes with longevity, heart disease, whatever. Let's ignore all of that, Kimberly. So what is the importance for you with blood sugar regulation, and how did it connect to some of these health issues that you might have had?
So I didn't know at the time when I first started my elimination diet and was eating the avocado toast and scrambled eggs and vegetables in the morning. I didn't realize that single thing was helping to balance my blood sugar issues that I was having before. Like I said, I wasn't really paying attention to my body. I was just eating for enjoyment. And as a teacher and a mom at the time, I was just trying to head out the door as fast as I could. And sometimes I would just grab pretzels and a Coke to eat for breakfast, not just pretzels, but peanut butter pretzels. Had to have some protein in there.
Mhm.
But, I didn't realize that that was connected to everything. But as far as blood sugar goes, now that I look back on my journey and I see the things that I did to heal myself, um, and of course, it's not just me. I don't take credit for everything. Like, I had a lot of people, doctors and functional medicine practitioners that helped me get here. But blood sugar played a big role because I have such a sweet tooth, and I could eat sugar all day long, and sometimes I did, which is why I wound up where I was. Um, and getting rid of sugar completely for a period of time, eating whole foods and vegetables, and incorporating more vegetables really was a big formula for me to start to feel better. And my skin was looking more radiant, my hair was thicker. I had lost 30 pounds in that process of changing everything. And I know that blood sugar played a huge part in that. And I didn't wear a CGM at that time. It was about a year and a half later that my functional medicine doctor had me wear a CGM, because on the way to seeing her, it was about an hour and a half drive. Um, I decided not to fast, and I picked up a Chick-fil-A sandwich and like a sweet tea or something on the way over there. So an hour and a half later, when they took my blood work, there was some hypoglycemia that was showing up in my blood work. And so that's when she was like, let's see what's going on. And she prescribed me a CGM. And there was a lot of interesting information and data that I got from that, from the foods I was eating. And now it's been over 2 years. I have one on right now. And still, I learned so much with just seeing how certain foods are still reacting, even with a healed gut. So blood sugar plays such a huge role in so many different things. And it's such a great tool for preventative medicine, I think, to keep people in the know of how foods are reacting in their body. Because whether it's really high or really low, none of that is really good for you.
Well, and the reality is too, different foods hit different people differently. I'm not trying to just be cute there, but like that's really the best way to say it. In addition, there's going to be foods that you can eat at a certain time. Like, all right, there's a huge difference between carb loading after an intense workout versus if I've been sitting at a desk all day doing nothing. Those carbs are going to affect me differently. And I think it's such a great learning tool. And this is probably because I do want to be objective. And even though I try to be very fair to Western medicine on this, that is where when I see the comments like that, because I don't know if you see these, to me, it's abundant. I don't know if it's just my algorithm. The amount of people acting as if someone is like stupid for using a CGM or something, I can't get behind that, and I can't understand that. And I actually think that is an issue of philosophy as opposed to genuine ignorance, because it's like you're saying that you're willing to wait until I get a diagnosis. Well, how would I get a diagnosis anyway? Best case is I'm smart enough to do a yearly physical, and on that yearly physical, I happen to catch an elevated blood sugar, and then I'm still going to have to come in a second time to get a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, right? Or prediabetes or whatever. Or, like most people, you don't get the yearly physical, and you're not even going to know that something's wrong until the symptoms are so bad that they're bothering you enough that you end up going into a doctor to complain about them. Why on earth would anyone think that if I want to spend the money on this, I'm not hurting anyone by doing that. If I want to spend the money on a CGM, that I'm not doing a good thing for preventative. And I think that's a larger conversation. I don't mean to go off on a tangent per se, but that's where I appreciate both of us being very fair to Western medicine in the beginning. But when I see stuff like that, I think it's asinine to act like, why would I not use this tool to help me? We blow $200 on stupid crap all the time, right? And I think that's usually what the monthly subscriptions are for these. I spend money on things I shouldn't all the time. So if I want to spend $200 on that, it doesn't hurt anyone. I don't know why I would be bad for doing something like that preventatively. I think you learn a lot.
Well, I think there's just a stigma, and so because these devices were used strictly for diabetics, right? And just like every other great invention, you find other ways to use it that are for the good of other people.
Yes.
And so whenever biohackers started figuring out that, hey, wearing these things help me see I'm not a diabetic, but look at what I'm learning and look at how I can tweak this to make myself, better, healthier. It's then they share what they've learned, and then it starts to go mainstream. And then people in the health space are like, oh, well, I want to do this to be healthier. And I want data, because we all want data. Like, we love data. People in the health space just want data, because it gives us a direction of where to go, or it tells us that we are doing the right things from what we've tried. And so I love CGMs, just because I think everybody should have this tool in order to see what food does for them so that they can make some tweaks. Because even though you have people who might look healthy, blood sugar is going to tell you, these CGMs are going to tell you if you really are metabolically healthy or not with what you're eating.
I don't want to put you on the spot with this question, but my last one about blood sugar, and if you don't know this offhand, it's all good. Are you familiar with, it was a meta-analysis, I believe, that showed it was blood sugar levels fasting, like in the morning, either 85 or 90, and it would have been versus like 80 or 85 respectively. Are you aware of that one that shows that those people have like significantly higher risks of developing type 2 diabetes later, or various cardiac issues? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I've heard about it, but I haven't read it myself.
Okay, well, thank you for your honesty as well. So let's just say Kimberly and I are both aware of this. Don't take us on the numbers, but I am positive it's only 85 or 90. Now, neither of those at the fasting level would ever qualify you for a type 2 diabetes diagnosis. But what's crazy is those 5-point difference was enough to show significant risk factors for heart disease. And so that would be another argument that I have against these people that are saying, oh, this is like silly to use this. I'm like, I was about to say, are you aware of the science? Maybe I need to be more aware of the science because I can't even cite it properly. So I will get that done for next podcast. But I remember seeing that years ago, and I thought that was so profound. I'm like, how many people are walking around? If this many people have type 2 diabetes, and then this many people have prediabetes, which is a ton, how many people don't even meet the qualifications for those, but just have that slightly elevated blood sugar in the morning, at least elevated according to these studies, that are now placing them at greater risk factors for this stuff. So the CGM thing didn't fully hit me until I went to the Hicks event in October in San Diego, and that was the first time I used one, actually. And so, Boris, you got one just for signing up for the conference or something. And when I was watching it, I just remember thinking, oh, this is the future, man. Mm-hmm. Like there's going to be, everyone's going to have this. This makes total sense for everyone to have this. There is correlations with blood sugar spikes and dips and road rage, mental health issues, cardiac issues, as I've mentioned multiple times already. How on earth would we not figure out a way to do this? And Boris promised me, he said, because of the continuous demand, so this is another reason to advocate for it and say it's actually good for the diabetic community, because of the continuous demand, it is eventually going to get to a place where this can be a fraction of the price that it is now, costing insurance companies less and costing the consumers less. That seems like a net win to me.
Absolutely. And I think that, this is hopefully where medicine is going, is into more preventative versus reactive. So having these CGMs is what is going to keep people from getting to either pre-diabetic or diabetic, so that, the cost of all of that, and being a diabetic patient, that will hopefully go away, or be less than, because of using this as a tool for prevention versus reaction when somebody is actually diagnosed with it.
Yeah. We'll move on a bit. Guys, I see a lot of you watching, so thanks for being here with us today. If you have any questions over the last 10 minutes or so of this show for Kimberly, please drop them below. By the way, I think you're in full screen, so you can't see it, but Ashley at one point did say that's amazing and congrats. She was just happy with your seeming remission of symptoms, certainly beating the heck out of the symptoms. But I want to shout out, shameless plug for our scientific literacy advanced course. It's only $97. It's something like fdntraining.com. Go to the resources and check out scientific literacy. That's also taught by Dr. Lori Rose. Again, PhD, teaches out of college. She's a sharp cookie. And the reason that matters to me is because when people say do their own research, I get why a certain side doesn't like that, right? And they're like, well, you're not doing your own research, because you're not in a lab. Fair enough. You can learn how to read a study. You can do this. You can be a lay person. You might not even have done well in high school, and you can still figure this out if you want to put in the work for that. And the scientific literacy course can help with that, because I'm at my parents', who I love to death, and I swear on my life I'm not making this up. This actually just happened this afternoon beforehand. I walked downstairs. I had about 3 minutes being downstairs to grab a quick snack. On the TV, all I'm hearing is about, it sucks that you can't bring this stuff up because everyone thinks you're being political. I couldn't give a crap about the political stuff. I do give a crap about health, guys, so that's my statement. It was about the fluoride thing and a certain individual wanting to remove fluoride from the water, right? In a 3-minute span, Kimberly, what I just heard down there was that the Florida Surgeon General and other people are citing controversial studies about fluoride. they're saying how they brought up how Buffalo, New York apparently removed fluoride in one community 9 years ago. And apparently the parents are now fighting to have it back and suing because of emergency dental surgeries because of the kids having issues. And I'm sitting there thinking, how many people are going to eat this up and not even realize that, yes, fluoride is a neurotoxin and lowering of IQ. That's not controversial. That's been known for 20 years. And certainly most of Europe's known that. And then in addition, while it is known that fluoride, yes, it does help tooth decay. That is true. But there's never been good evidence to show that it does that when it's in your water. There's evidence to show that when you get fluoride treatment at a dentist or in your toothpaste. So I'm sitting there thinking, the average person is never going to look elsewhere. Now, does the TV lie in other ways, and do people that are politicians or celebrities lie? Yes, they do. So you know what the answer is? Learn how to read a damn scientific study and go figure it out for yourself. You never have to go to a lab. You tell me. Don't make an opinion based on what I just said. Go read the study showing that fluoride is a neurotoxin, and go read the study showing that it helps with tooth decay when it's in water. You tell me which one of those is good. So hopefully we got a lot of action steps for people today, Kimberly. I'm sorry. I almost did a solo podcast on that later. I'm like, I could not believe 3 minutes. And so what the hell else is being said all day? Because I don't listen to this stuff normally. All right. I digress. With working with clients, you mentioned who your kind of ideal type of person is to work with. Now, when they work with you, if they choose to work with you, what could they expect in terms of labs? Are there a set of foundational labs that you've now adapted to your practice? Do you use the FDN foundationals? No worries either way. I'm just curious about learning more.
No, I still use the FDN foundational labs. I really love, but instead of the SHP, I really like the Dutch test. I've become very keen to the Dutch test and the in-depth knowledge that you get from that. And then also, I love the GI map, because the GI map and the Dutch test really, to me, go hand in hand. Gut health and hormones go hand in hand. Because if your gut is off, then your hormones are going to be off. But if your hormones are off and your gut is okay, then you can work on the hormone part, but if not, you got to work on the gut part first. And then I really love the mucosal barrier assessment, just to see what's going on, to see if leaky gut is very apparent, if histamine issues are apparent, and how that's functioning. And then I also love the metabolic wellness panel that looks at oxidative stress, and it also looks at zonulin or indican, and it also gives you some look at your liver to see if your bile acids are doing well. And that was a huge thing for me, is knowing about my liver health. And you also get some of those markers on the GI map too. And then I love doing food sensitivity testing, because it's such an easy, low-hanging fruit to really help your body and its immune system right away. Is just eliminating things that you are reacting to, and then it gives you a list of things to shop. So everything that's been tested on the food list, I think if it's in green, I think is a great grocery store list, at least for 60 to 90 days. Because it's been tested and we know that's not going to react to your immune system. So I really like starting out with those.
Let's just stick to facts with this question. Not that you're not. I'm saying this just because I'm about to make a bold statement here. So you dealt with a lot of symptoms, pretty severe ones. Mm-hmm. It's now been almost 2 years since the last episode. And even the last episode, it was almost a year before that you had any issues. The stuff that you're doing, obviously, is the stuff that helped you get to that. Did any of the stuff that you're running now or using with clients, these labs, did any of those ever get offered to you by Western medicine for your symptoms?
No, unfortunately not. Whenever I came over to functional medicine, even those doctors were the ones that introduced me to some of these functional labs. I had an organic acids test done. I had a stool test done, just like a GI map. And that was my first introduction. And it's unfortunate that insurance doesn't pay for those things, because they tell us so much, more so than just blood work. But hopefully medicine will go in that direction.
So one didn't do anything like this. One did. One time your symptoms didn't get better. In fact, they kind of got worse. And in one, they got significantly better, almost to the point where you probably, after 2 years, my friend, I think we can almost call that remission at some point. Just the facts. You guys make your own decisions about what that means. Zoe, I will get to your question right after this, but I always, once I say where or what you do with clients, I like to ask where people can find you. So Kimberly, where can people find you? And then we'll leave that up at the bottom for the rest of the show.
So I'm on Instagram and TikTok as Kimberly Rose Wellness. And those are the best places to find me. I do have a website that has a free guide for Nutrition 101 and has some other information about me on there. That is bit.ly/Kimberly Rose Wellness.
Awesome. And Tracy, we can leave that up. Thank you so much for helping. Zoe, I think, I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think we just connected on Instagram recently. So nice to see you here. But I want to, actually, sorry, Tracy, I'm going to end up having to kick that off. I forgot because I want to share Zoe's question. So, oops. Now we're fighting over who's putting on what. Zoe said, in a functional space where there are already a lot of supplements, I'm curious about the highest ROI supplements, return on investment, from your experience for people managing blood sugar levels. That's a great question. So we can't take any more questions this time, guys, but we'll definitely get to this one. So what do you think?
Yeah, as far as blood sugar management, I know I remember trying berberine, but I really managed it more so through food. That was big for me. But as far as helping people, I think first getting started, berberine is a big heavy hitter that I usually recommend to people. And then on the Full Script store that I have, if you type in blood sugar, there's always really great supplement brands that come up if you're looking for different price points. But that's one of the ones that I recommend.
Yeah, Zoe, I'll throw in there as well things like inositol. Can help certain people. That can be kind of good for the blood sugar stuff. In addition, a lot of if you like some level of caffeine, not that you need to do it with the caffeine per se, but the green tea extracts can actually be kind of useful for that. But fundamentally, I agree with what you said, Kimberly. It's like the bottom line is supplements are great. I would probably wait till you're involved in some type of functional protocol. Even berberine, for example, like that's one of those things where it also acts as somewhat of an antibiotic. So that could be like the perfect supplement for someone depending on the tests. If I come back, I remember my naturopath recommended that like 8-9 years ago, and I didn't have enough information to know why, but she knew that I had certain gut bugs and I also had these blood sugar regulation issues. What a perfect supplement for me at the time. I'm actually killing two birds with one stone. So definitely best option if you can is get some testing, but I think these are good answers here.
And cinnamon also is something that helps naturally with blood sugar. I've just noticed that for myself. But I've read a lot of things on cinnamon helping with that as well, regulating that.
Awesome. All right. And Kimberly, we already shared where people can find you. If you've ever listened to a podcast here and got all the way to the end, you will know the signature question on the show to wrap up today. And the signature question is this: if we could give you a magic wand, you could wave it and you could get all the viewers and listeners to do one thing for their health. That means you could get us to start doing one thing, or you can get us to stop doing one thing. What's the one thing that you just get us to do for general health?
So my one thing would be changing your mindset about food and seeing food as medicine versus just food for enjoyment. We all want to eat food for enjoyment, but when we start to shift our mind towards seeing the things that we put into our body and how it's going to become a part of our body, it's going to remake the cells that we have. What are we putting in our body to remake those cells? So if we're eating a lot of sweets, if we're eating a lot of carbs, what kind of body is that going to recreate? If we're eating fruits and vegetables and good fats and proteins, what kind of body is that going to recreate? So just shifting your mind around food as medicine and not think of food as enjoyment every single day for every single meal, I really think will help a lot of people.
Awesome. Kimberly, I swear on my life I would never do this to you unless it was awesome and it proved the point. Guys, for those that are watching right now, could you please drop a thank you in the chat for Kimberly if you enjoyed this? This was only her second podcast, and I could not tell. I know that you couldn't tell either, so could you just drop a thank you? It's so powerful for those that are getting into this because I want someone like Kimberly out on all the health podcasts. Like, let's spread her around, right? We got to get the information out there. So the thank yous can really act as a source of encouragement for individuals that are out there doing this. So I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I hope that's okay. Don't.
No, it's totally fine.
Detective Ev's always just saying stuff he shouldn't say. So you rock. We'd love to have you back on in the future. It's great to finally get connected here. And thank